Roxanne. Go ahead and call this meeting to order. If you please stand and join us for the Pledge of Allegiance. I pledge
Allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all.
Good morning. This is May 16th. This is the Broadwater County Commissioners Business Meeting. We follow Robert's Rules of Order. We also have a civility policy and an open meeting process policy. We follow these so that we can open our meetings to all Broadwater County citizens. We have a fiscal and fiduciary responsibility to conduct all our business as efficiently as possible for all those residents. Meetings are recorded and are on YouTube, so please state your full name prior to any public comment. Any separate conversations should be removed out into the hall. Outbursts will not be tolerated. Public comment gives each person who wishes to speak an initial 3 minutes to do so, and all comments should be directed to the board chair. This morning we are starting earlier than usual, so we opted to keep public comment, Montana Minute, and Commissioners Community Update at the same time as usual. So we're going to jump right into our agenda. Julie Opinion, Centennial Insurance, Mako Liability Insurance Renewal. Come on forward. Good morning.
This is Miss Shannon with Mako.
Yes, I'm Shannon Shanholzer. You're used to Greg Jackson being here, and he is actually retiring as of July 1st. And I have been working as the trust administrator since November, where he moved into a temporary position of the trust operations director, which is a new position that they are doing the search for right now. So he'll be stuck with me for the next probably 30 years if I work as long as he is. So stuck. So I'm here to go over the insurance renewal for the property and casualty and the workers' compensation. The first couple pages are just the agenda. We'll go through each of these line items. But if I can have you turn to actually the pink page. This is your renewal comparison. So a couple things. There was an average of about 8.5% across the pool. That was the average. We had, you're on the very low end of that average for increases, and we had some couple counties that were up in the 20s, 20% increase. And what happened was with the policy management system, we've been able to true up our values for the property rates. So kind of moving from an assessment-based rating to actual values and rates for a property. So over the years, everybody was underwritten into the pool the same way, and then it was just a percentage increase depending on all of the excess premiums that we were charged. So the comparison doesn't look exactly the way it probably should. You'll notice that down the bottom, or towards the end, your property excess premium went down. And what that was is maybe it was a little skewed for a few years there. So we're showing up the property rates. There were some counties that were not paying enough property rates, property premium, and we couldn't just take that out of their loss fund, so we ended up having to charge them quite a bit more. So we are easing it in for them over the next 5 years, but your guys' ended up being okay. So there were 3 catastrophic losses that we had over the last couple of years that weren't necessarily reserved correctly, and they were kind of surprises, if you will. We're self-insured up to $500,000, and then there's another layer of the Brit reinsurance. And we had three claims that were at the max of the $750,000 that were not reserved near that. So what that does is the financials are skewed. I mean, it was a surprise. It was scary for everybody. So since then, the trustees and the claims department have come up with some new reserving methods that are in place now, so that won't be the case for the actuary. He won't have all of these surprises and then say, well, this brings your net assets down. So they did increase the liability loss fund on the base of that across the board for everybody, a 7.8% increase. And
So
then
That happened in another county, but everybody in the pool is paying the 7.5 increase.
There was 3 different claims and they happened throughout the state, yes, throughout different counties and over the last couple of years. But yes, everybody across the entire pool, all 49 counties did receive the 7.8% increase on the liability loss fund.
Okay, all right.
And then if you look down towards the middle of the page, that's your loss ratio adjustments. So these are what's individual. So you have your what's happening as a pool, and then this is your individual results. And so you did both on both, great on both of these. And if you want to turn to the next page really quick, you'll see your loss ratios, and that's what those are based on. Those are the 5-year loss ratios. And so your liability loss ratio is at 12%. That's not terrible at all. Your property is way down at 9%. And then if you go back to that first page, the loss ratio adjustment for the PLF APP, that stands for the property loss fund, auto physical damage only. So we understand that you can't control the losses that you're gonna have with your property with hail damage, windstorms, things like that. So this is actually only your losses for the auto physical damage. And we're self-insured for property up to 100,000, and that's where we see the majority of the losses is for the autos, because they're all falling within that $100,000 layer. So that was another increase on the property loss fund towards the top there, was 10 cents per 100 on the vehicles only. So it went from 50 cents per 100 to 60 cents per 100.
There was an increase across the board for that one?
But it depends on your values of your vehicles.
Okay, because we went down, so I just wanted to clarify.
You did, and that was all because of that shoring up your true values. And that's why we've been so adamant, especially the last couple of years when we had the system in place, to make sure that your values were correct on the schedules, so that you weren't going to be charged too much or too little. We wanted to go directly off of your schedules.
So these are more real numbers.
Yes. And going forward from here, they will always be real. I don't want to say that things were being done wrong for the last 30 years, but they're going to, we're taking a new approach.
Sure.
So, I'm more of a numbers person, and I need to know why and how and where those numbers are coming from, so that's how we built the underwriting in the system. So. The third line is the liability premium, that's your bond payments, and that of course stays the same. The BRIT reinsurance premium, that's that layer up above the self-insured liability of $500,000. So we've had that in place now for 5 years, and they have not increased the premium. We were a little hesitant this year because we did go into that layer 3 times, but they didn't increase yet. So that's a good thing. The cyber liability, we put that into place 3 years ago. And we did go with a new company this year. The company is XL, and they offered us higher limits with a lower premium. So the
Nice.
Course of Trustees chose that, and we passed that savings on to you. And then the property excess premium, that's that rate that is for everything above our self-insured layer of $100,000. So, and you'll see that went down too, and that was just because we were shoring everything up. The administrative costs, those are made up of your agent commission that you pay, and the claims operational costs, and the administrative operational of the NICO staff that's for the trust. So this is, my salary, Greg's salary, and then the loss control people, things like that. And those are based on a percentage of your net premium, and those have not increased over the last 3 years. So we'd like to try to keep those to where we're not increasing them. So, and that's all dependent on our budgets within NICO. So I think the bottom line gives you 3.16% increase, which I know within the pool, this is the lowest that we had, one of the lowest, right around 3 was our lowest. So I don't know if you can elaborate more on like a commercial level, if you're seeing more increases than this, or?
The commercial, yeah, it's been going up a little bit. They're changing their values from, because of all the older buildings, everything's going actual cost value rather than replacement cost, because you can't replace an older building. So we're seeing some action going on.
And we do still offer the replacement value, that's why we paid for the appraisals. And so you have that option of either doing the appraised replacement value, so in the event of a loss, you're gonna have full replacement value, or we offer you the option to either not have it covered, I mean, there's no coverage, or you can do a lower stated value. So if something appraises for $500,000, but you're not utilizing it, we have a building in Madison County, it's an old schoolhouse that it's on the registry for historical purposes, and so it appraised higher. They don't use it for anything but storage. So they don't wanna pay premium on the $500,000, they're paying $100,000, just enough to make sure that in the event of a loss they can clean it up and maybe replace with something just for storage that they're using it for.
So we can make that decision individually
yes.
for each building
Yes,
based on our use, that's nice.
yes.
Okay.
Any other questions?
No,
Okay, so we'll move on, the next page, that was just your losses, so. Okay, these are a couple pages that are taken from the manuscript liability indemnity agreement, and what that is our liability policy that's just ours, so we have written this policy, and the trustees can make changes to it, the trustees only. Staff can make recommendations, but the trustees make all of the ultimate decisions. So the first part here that we made some changes on, the red, under medical payments, the red scored out, that's what was taken out, and the yellow was added. And what this is just kind of a clarification. We have a no-fault med pay clause in our policy. This is not something that's normal in a lot of commercial policies, but there is a reason that we have this. So what it is if somebody slips and falls on your sidewalks out here and they file a claim, we're automatically going to offer them the $5,000 med pay, and without even admitting negligence on your part. And the claims department and the legal department have both they're very adamant about keeping this in here because they swear that it takes the opportunity for higher claims away. So these people are just gonna be happy with that rather than saying, no, we don't want that, we wanna sue you for $200,000 instead. So they feel that this is important. But what we did, because we don't give you the opportunity to say, well, we want this to be a higher claim, or, we took away the deductible, so you don't have to pay your deductible on this particular type of a loss. And we don't have a lot of them, but when we do, they are definitely, it's worth it to just go ahead and send out letters, so. On the next page, these are a part of the exclusions. And one of the new things is drones. And because we don't really know what's going to come with drones, how you get certified to operate a drone, there's so many unknowns, including how do we underwrite for coverage for this and what kind of premium do we charge. And we did some research across the US, and I talked to a pool in Tennessee who actually added coverage, and they added it and weren't even actually including any additional premium, and they're kicking themselves, but they don't know what to do. So until we can get that figured out, the trustees have made the decision just to exclude all liability from drones. So this includes anything that the county would own, a drone, or if you have somebody that's using it, their personal drone for use at the sheriff's office, search and rescue, anything like that, we're not gonna cover that, any liability on that. There's a good possibility that in the future this will be taken out and we'll add coverage. It's just, right now it's just a lot of, too many unknowns. We need to figure that out.
makes sense.
Any questions?
You okay?
Next page is the regional training schedule. And of course, almost all of these are all done and over with, but we don't make this schedule until October, but it's pretty much the same. So we always have those 4 webinars in November, December, and January, and then the regional trainings are all right around that same time frame. The trustees did, as part of their financial obligations with all of these changes, they did take away the loss control credits. they discontinued them for this year, which was $100,000 for the pool, just for the liability side. You'll still receive those for the work comp. And I think you guys are pretty good about sending people to most of these trainings, right?
Yeah.
And then, of course, there's at the bottom of the association trainings. So we have the 2 MACO conferences, which we always have a lot of training on. And then there's all of the, MACRs. I'm sure you guys send people to MACRs. MSPOA, all of those. We try to have somebody, either staff at one of these trainings. I've done a couple trainings at Clerk and Recorders, their meetings, or we will contract with somebody. It's not always just enough time for all of us to get to these training places too. So.
Sure. Sorry.
Okay.
It's okay, we all enjoy it.
The next page is this is the screenshot of our policy management system. Bonnie Knopf has been sending out username, logins, and passwords, so you guys can go in and kind of play around in there. And I think she's done a webinar with you guys too.
Mhm.
So that's with the system. The clerk and recorders have been using this for a couple of years now for the payroll reporting, for work comp, and the agents have been using it for all of the renewals, information, and the property schedules. So we are almost to the point of being completed. It's been a long process, just starting from zero. I mean, we ultimately built it with the developers ourselves, so it's been a challenge, but it's definitely worth it. So there will be some online training through BRIT, which is our reinsurance carrier, and they are giving us a portal that you'll be able to reach through here, that you just go in, the safety coordinators can assign trainings, and or there's things that you can just, anybody can go in there and do as if they have passwords to get into here. So Jim Muscovich will be coming around and working with you on that as far as the online loss control training, and it's all free, so that was the good part.
Nice.
Where the red box is here, that's where you can click on that to go, that just takes you to, I think, NADA. So you can value your vehicles on the vehicle schedules to make sure that they're correct. And one thing that we are doing, we did purchase, or we are going to purchase, for equipment, it's not free. It's not like you can just go online to go to a free one. So we are purchasing that. I'm on the road a lot in May and June. I'm hoping to have it done by the end of June, and I'll have this on here, and it'll help you guys and the agents to value your equipment, because that seems to be the most difficult thing for as far as valuing is the graders, things like that. So it'll help you be more accurate on that as far as the schedules go. Any other questions? Okay, we'll move on to the workers' compensation. Okay, at the top, you will see that your mod factor has been reduced dramatically. That is great. That is, I mean, that you've gone down below 1 for one. I mean, that's a big step, but then going all the way down to 8.5 is great. So it's maxed out, or it's tapped out at 1.25 and then 0.75 on the low end, but you are almost down there. So that's going to help you with your premiums. You're going to see your premiums go down even with a couple of these increases over here. So
Nice.
you guys have, that's on a 3-year loss, and it looks like in 2013, which is the first year, you had 23,000 in losses for work comp, and that's going to go away next year. So as long as you have a good year this year, you're going to go down, probably down to the 0.75. So you're doing things the right way. If you look at the rates from last year versus this year, we've had some decreases, some increases. Our major increases were in the two 8824 and 9040, which are the nursing home class codes, which you guys do not have to deal with. You're fortunate for that.
Mhm.
That's where we see the majority of our losses. So we are down to 4 nursing homes. There's 3 in Madison County, 1 in Garfield County, and for some reason Garfield County is able to keep their bond factor down. They've been doing really well. And Teton County has one, but they are closing it effective May 25th, so they won't. So if we can get these people just to sell their nursing homes, it'd be great, and we don't have to worry about that at all. It's just a really hard on the work comp as far as the employees, so. And like I said, we had some increases and some decreases, but across the board, it wasn't so bad at all. And these are the rates that everybody uses. And then your mod factor is from your individual losses. And we'll be sending out something, I used to send it out the end of May to the clerk and coders and the payroll clerks, these rates, but they don't use these rates until they report in October for the first quarter, which is July, August, September. So we're probably not gonna send these out until July, so that everybody's aware of that. Okay, the next page where it says option 3. The trustees had asked for options for, these are the credit criteria that Amelia uses to determine your loss control credits. And they asked for some other options, and this is the option that they did go with this year. It used to be that the modification factor was 50% of your points, and now it's only going to be 25%, and everything else is kind of spread evenly. We have less emphasis on the safety vest and the safety congress. Amelia and Jim both felt that the last couple of years that hasn't been necessarily worth the time for the counties to be spending money and sending people to. It's a lot of repeat information, and they're making cuts, and so there's a good chance that this may fall off of the criteria altogether, but for right now she wanted to at least not make it as important to go to.
Okay.
And that's the one that's put on by the Department of Labor. It's something that we do. So. And the last page is this is just the evaluation profile that Amelia comes in. I don't know if did she come down here to do this yet this year?
She does not.
Okay, she's doing that right now in May and June. So this used to be kind of an opinion of Amelia's. It was a scoring of 1 to 5 and on each question, and now it's just yes or no. So you're going to understand, you're going to get this with your check, and you're going to see if you missed anything, you'll see why. Okay, we didn't do this. So it helps. I think your guys' safety program is actually going pretty well.
Yeah.
That's a good thing.
Yeah.
Okay, and then as far as the agenda goes, there was a couple other things. Just want to remind you of the importance of the volunteer firefighters being on the rosters, because if they are not on the rosters, which is inside the policy management system, and premium paid, there is not coverage. So I know it's hard, especially out in the rural areas where you have a farm, it's on fire, and the neighboring farmers and ranchers are coming to help, and there's not going to be coverage unless they're on there. And that's statute, that's not us, that's in statute, so. And the refuse sites, so that's where 2 of those major catastrophic losses that we had were at refuse sites. And do you guys have, that's what you have around here in
We
Broward?
don't have a landfill, but we do have a transfer station.
Yes, and that's where these happened.
Okay.
Those people fell into them.
All collector sites.
You mean the dumpster sites? Yeah.
Yes. So Jim Moskovich is actually putting together a working group right now, and he's got people from the cities and the towns and the counties, and then the state, building codes, and just kind of putting everybody together to come up with some guidelines, and we'll be sending those out once we have them put together, just to kind of help you. There isn't a specific code, I guess, or there was, but it hasn't been enforced, and so he's just putting that together so that we can mitigate some of the losses as far as that goes. Okay, I think that's about everything, unless you have any more questions for me.
I don't.
No, thank you.
Any questions for me? No, you answered all.
All right, very good.
We do have a question, Cheryl, and state your name for the record if you would, please.
My name's Cheryl Campbell. Back last November, I asked about the insurance requirement under Montana Code annotated 2-9-701. There's just 4 lines here. County officers and employees to be bonded. All elected and appointed county officers and employees must be bonded for the faithful performance of all official duties required by law. A bond may cover an individual officer or employee, or a blanket bond may cover all officers and employees, or any group or combination of officers and employees. Do we have that?
Yes. We do provide a fidelity crime policy that has a blanket bond for all employees and elected officials. And it's just part of this premium.
Thank you very much. Any other questions? All right. Well, you two are great to work with. Thank you very much.
Thanks again.
Yeah, thank you.
Yeah, no
We
problem.
gotta get on the roads.
Anytime.
Have a great day.
All right, we're a couple minutes early. Thanks you guys for coming. We'll have Debbie up here in probably 4 minutes to go ahead and get started with our budget training. Here she is. Good morning. Yeah, that would be great. And we're just 3 minutes ahead and it'll take a few minutes to get organized, so we can go ahead and jump right in. Working subject, Debbie Kelly, Accounting Manager, Department Heads, Budget Process Review. And this is something, for those of you new, we do this annually, and it's just kind of an overview of what the law requires and how the law dictates that we do budgeting. There was some misunderstandings at the forum about, a month ago, on what the law tells us we can and cannot do with budgeting. So we also sent a PowerPoint to all the different candidates so that they would have the information as well. And this will be a chance to also further illuminate the public so everyone's on the same page.
Harold PowerPoint is pretty self-explanatory, so I have not gone into a lot of detail. And I think he did a really good job of simplifying and explaining it.
And that's this that was sent out to everybody?
So I'm just gonna kind of highlight on the different pages so you can kind of break it down what it's all about. So basically, we look at a budget as an official statement for government on how much it's gonna estimate it to spend during a specified period and how it will pay for those expenditures.
And Debbie, would you read or just share what the code is as you go through to, oh, you didn't, that's fine. You know what, that's fine, we'll do it after.
Because he's got so much in here, this is 5 pages long,
Yeah.
and he would reinvent his wheel.
How about this, what's the overall code chapter? What's the?
Title 7, Chapter 6 are the main ones, and it starts like 401.
4001?
4001. 4002 is the definitions, which kind of summarizes what I was just talking about. And estimations, of course, as we know, are based on our past spending to help us determine what our future needs for spending are gonna be. It details the structure.
Just because we started early, I see some people outside, I'm just gonna let them know.
Okay.
Jessica, is there anyone else outside?
Not that I saw.
Okay, thank you. Sorry.
Basically, there's a couple types of budgets that we kind of work on, fixed and flexible. Fixed are what most of us go by because we can't change what we're spending without a budget amendment. A flexible budget applies more to enterprise funds, such as solid waste, the silos, because they comprise most of their revenues from fees or assessments. So we have to keep those in mind and keep them separated. We have to keep our expenditures are limited to our appropriations. And that's on page 9. We can't exceed that, or the individual or government official who exceeds that is liable for that personally. That's why we have to be really hard that the bottom line is we don't exceed, so that we're not liable for those overages. The budgets can be amended, that's on page 10, through regular meetings. So we can make those changes to those appropriations. Say we get mid-year, we get a grant that comes through mid-year. That's approved, we have to make amendments, which are approved through the approval process. End of the year amendments, if there was nothing budgeted for a line item. Didn't think I was gonna spend any and find out I had to. Those are amendments to change that. So long as we don't exceed the bottom line, what we're gonna spend, or where's the money coming from, we're still in compliance.
Hey, Debbie, would you explain too how this is different than a personal checkbook? When we get that grant, say for $50,000, and you put it into the budget, the balancing, how it has to show on both sides.
The grants specify X amount of money that you can spend. And most of the time, it requires the department to itemize what they're spending and break it down into detail, whether it's operations, salary, and keep track of that. A lot of times we set up project codes as a separate way to track those grants, separate from their budget, so that when we need reports, because some of the grants we need reports, we can pull those projects and get a report for the department heads. So we know we aren't expeding it, because a lot of times it's, some of the grants are, you use them and then you send us a bill and we'll reimburse you. So we don't always necessarily have the money up front. We have to do the work to get reimbursed. And that one's kind of a hard one because it will show we've exceeded expenditure because we haven't billed for it yet. So that can be kind of a tricky one to most of us if we aren't sure what we're doing or looking for, which grants are tricky.
And when you do an amendment and you have that extra revenue of $50,000, you can't just put it in revenue, you also have to show that $50,000 in expenses, right?
Mhm. And so when I add it as a project, it then flows upward into their regular budget as part of their overall expenses. But the projects delineate X amount set aside for this project, and here's X amount coming in. WEED uses them, the health clinic uses them, Victim Witness. There's one for the building. DES uses a lot, the sheriff's office has a few that they've used in the past. So there's quite a few that we do grants work for.
And most of the grants you have to propose what you're gonna spend on, items that you're gonna purchase or
The grant will
patrols.
specify.
Yes, yeah.
Exactly how much they wanna see, like the junk vehicle program. They designate X amount towards the salary or the administration.
Right.
All that, X amount to Gerald or whoever our contractor is to go tow those vehicles. And we have to watch that certain amount for office expense, for advertising. Same way with most of the others.
So it's just not, we have to file that grant,
Mhm.
just for clarification,
Yes,
there's
we have to
some.
file it, we have to request it. There's a lot of paperwork involved with the request, so that they know if you're gonna spend it right or where you're gonna spend it. Sometimes we get them, sometimes we don't.
Right.
Depends on, they say somebody else is needier or deserves it more, whatever their criteria.
Sure. And then there's quarterly reports and things of that nature that go along with it.
One of the ones that is really particular is DES. He has to file a quarterly report, account for every line item for wages, office expense, meetings, training, all of that. He has to provide a detailed report of how he spends that. So to make sure they keep him in compliance, or he's in compliance with the grant terms. So So it's not something the county has a lot of, you can't spend it on that, you gotta spend it somewhere else, the grant dictates that.
Exactly, thank you.
It is possible to have voted levies in addition to our regular levies. The floating mills that we get that are based on our tax valuations, like the schools and the hospitals, there's a certain criteria they have to meet, say how much they're gonna need, and then the voters will say yes or no, so we do have some of those. We've had some of those outside of our floating levies for the general fund. Budgets are required to be submitted, or preliminary budgets of what you wanna spend, they have to be in by June 1st. And then we let the commission know, we've got preliminary budgets going on, and what they wanna spend, and then that's when the commissioner's work really begins in tearing through those, and saying, okay, we can pay for it, or you gotta cut. And it's always a guess until we get our valuations. We know what the CPI for possible cost of living increases are gonna be, for salaries and wages. It's a lot of guesswork. It does factor into what our cash balances are at the end of the year, and what we expect to spend, and what we anticipate to receive to come up with what's gonna be left at the end of the year. If we're not gonna have enough revenue to cover our expenditures, then we have to decrease them. That's a tough one, because there are some of those. There is a reserve that is required to be kept. The maximum is 33%. And
While you're looking at that, or looking for that, Debbie, when Harold Gladdy was here, who's the director of MACO and used to do the budgeting trainings, one thing, he said, one thing we used to try and do is tell all department heads, don't increase your budgets, keep them where they're at. If you wanna raise it, you need to justify it. I think that's still a good idea, but his suggestion was the preliminary budget, the one turned in June, is more of a Christmas list. Everything you want, go ahead and put it in your budget, and then the commissioners cut that down. So there's two schools of thought there, and it's really up to us if we follow either instructing department heads to stay the same, and justify increases, or giving them the option for a wish list or a Christmas list.
let's see, I'll write it in first, but we do have to keep in mind that 33% is designated to get us into the next spending year, approximately July through November, until the final budget is set. If we're over that 33%, they either need to spend more, or figure out where the revenue, that they need less mills or need less revenue. Not too many have that problem. If they can tuck it away, they try to. I know road department uses it. General fund for the building maintenance, vehicles. If they do have extra, they can say, I need to spend and save for extra for a vehicle. It's in the capital improvements. So it's not too hard if they look like they're gonna get a little more revenue. Because, valuations are what they are, we can hold those back. There's been years past where if you don't spend all your mills, they can be reserved later in another year. Basically, the way the budget is structured then is we have operations, salaries, and capital outlay. And that's a tough one, because each one is broken down. So you could overspend in salaries if you weren't careful. You would have to do an amendment for that if you did. If you overspent operations and maintenance, that would also require an amendment. But most of the time, people are pretty good with their budgets. We haven't run into that yet. we've done really good at making sure that balances.
Yeah.
Yes. Well, the worst can happen, always prepare for the worst, hope for the best. But we've done really good. Most of the time I don't think in the years I've been here, we've had any individual line items, of course, we'll go over, but the whole budgets themselves, we haven't had that except for once, I think. That's probably about 8 years ago. First, we have a preliminary budget that has to go through a hearing, and that has to be in the paper and advertised a couple of weeks. And make sure that we follow that. That has to be done towards the end of June. About that time, then in August, we get our evaluations. And then we can go through and make final amendments based on those evaluations, and then we have another hearing, if we need to adopt the final budget. And that happens quite frequently because, as we all know, guesses are guesses. Until we get the actual numbers, it's hard to tell what we're gonna do. But that's why they allow or encourage, after you get your evaluations, to have another hearing and really go over it, so that when you submit your final budget, you know, barring anything unforeseen, you're gonna be in the black without worrying too much. I sent out a memo with timelines. In the past, every Wednesday, there's been working meetings until it's finalized. I don't know if we intend to do that this year. That was helpful for me, if nobody else. And Department of Revenue is required to submit valuations the first Monday in August. And this year, the first Monday in August, I believe, is the first. We have 30 days, or no later than the first Thursday after the first Tuesday in September. And that's, a Montana code dictates that 764036A. So pretty much we have that without pretty much any deviation. That's our absolute. And then from there, we have to provide the mill levies to Department of Revenue the second Monday in September, or within 30 calendar days. Because then they have to submit those to the state so they can start working on things for Doug so he can upload into software and prepare tax bills. Because he has to have tax bills out by the end of October. So to have that hearing and the finalization has to be on by the later of October 1st or 60 days after the receipt of the evaluations. So we've got a 60-day window from begin to end that we have to follow. And that's what governs how quickly, how fast I get this done. What else would you like to know?
Who is it that determines the mill values? And you answered who gives us our valuations.
Department of Revenue.
And that's out of the county's hands, that's their own formula.
That's a formula that they've come up with. I think Harold's slide kind of gave an example to give us an idea what we're gonna need based on those valuations, or what we can tax based on those valuations. It factors in previous year spending, what do I call it? Determination of the tax revenue mill levy limitations. This takes a factor of last year's and this year's. So like last year being 14-15 and 15-16 to come up with 16-17. It's kind of complicated, but this is what we follow. So any taxing jurisdiction, especially our, like mosquito is a special one, roads, soil conservation, Three Forks, mosquito, rural fire, Three Forks fire, they all get special valuations because they're a separate taxing district from the general fund. And then the general fund, you guys delineate how much of the floating mills the general fund keeps fair, senior citizens, museum, airports, we get of those floating mills. Public safety is another one.
And with the floating mills, would you explain how we've begun in the last 3 years, or I guess how we've been giving a certain number of mills to each of the different departments versus trying to fund the wish list?
We started about 3 years ago. Basically, every budget, they kind of, once they get them balanced, to keep up the same amount of mills. Once you know what you need to cover your expenditures every year, evaluations, the mills should cover those expenditures within a 10 approximately, and split those out between everybody. So of, like last year, there was like 107.94 floating mills. That was divvied up amongst everybody, and they get the same amount moving forward for the last 3 years. So that, oh, this year I need more money, okay, you get it, but sorry, Department B, you gotta cut your expenses because Department A needs more. You should have that balanced and know what your expenses are. There shouldn't be too many major changes. If there are, that's where they're supposed to come talk to the commission and make that decision, so the commission can decide if they're gonna fund you more, give you more meals, and if so, where to take it from, or how to pay for those extra spending. It's worked pretty well, I think, because everybody knows they've got limitations what they can work with, and they've worked within it. Outside of too many major vehicles, things like that nature, major equipment, there hasn't been too many that can't do it and work it within their budget, that have asked for more mills. And that just leaves the extra mills to help pay for extra things the county might need, senior citizens, or extra can go into the floating mills for, like this year we used it for some of the horse rescue, because we needed extra, all kinds of ways that you guys can use it, and have decided where. And just make it work.
Debbie, another thing, would you explain this part of Harold's PowerPoint? You guys could see her face, it was really good. And what I've asked her for, everyone who got the PowerPoint, is the description of how, the very basic description of how this all works, how mills work, and from the expert's mouth.
Well, basically, it has to do with how Department of Revenue has set up the taxable valuation for houses. So like on page 80, there's 10 houses at $1,000 each to generate $10,000 in property tax. One house is destroyed, it can be assessed, and they float up revenues because they're not getting revenue from the house that was destroyed, so the other 9 kind of pick it up, and that's what they call the floating, to help generate the same amount of revenue. If new houses are built, that same $1,000 will go on to 11 or 12 houses, and then it just raises taxes, more tax revenue for those extra houses. So a lot of it is based on taxable amount of property and what kind of money they anticipate based on that tax. That's how their valuations are come through.
So the idea is you have the $10,000 you need, and if you have 10 houses, each pays $1,000. If you lose one, each pays a little over $1,000. If you get more houses, each pays a little bit less to reach that same 10,000.
Kind of the idea, because if the house is destroyed, there's nothing, how do you get tax out of nothing? There's no value in it, it's burnt to the ground concept. Where you got more houses, there's that $1,000 because there's taxable property for them to assess. So it just increases your revenue. That's why things, when we're growing without divisions, things look better than now where it's kind of flat. We're just kind of at an even keel. We're not seeing more, per se. A lot of what we do as far as the funds are based on the BAR's chart of accounts, and that's at Local Government Services, Department of Admin, dictates that. The fund is the basic overall account, so if you were thinking of your checkbook, it's like your checking. You'd have a checking, a money market, and then you have accounts within those, different funds within those accounts. And then the object codes are what you're gonna spend your money out of that money market or bank account, is kind of the concept, to dumb it down. And that's all determined by the BARS book that we have to follow. We do have capital improvement funds that are designed, like Harold Slide said, for a rainy day, for those purchases that are very large.
Does every entity have?
No, they do not, just certain ones, and they have to request it and base their reasoning with the commissioners. I know like the airport, they're facing having to meet some FAA regulations and do the runway, so they have one. The libraries had one in the past to help with new equipment, new purchases of books, things of that nature. They usually submit a request and say, we're gonna need this year. And so we try to start taking away into these CIP funds, so they can help offset the cost rather than that money being forfeited somewhere.
Sure.
And it works good because then it decreases the amount that a lot of people like to come to PILT for. It decreases that. And it does make sense if there's extra and you did good balancing your fund, balancing your account, that money could be tucked away for those future needs, just like we would do at home. Trying to think, like road has one, the county has one, sheriff has one, library, fair had one at one point in time, but they haven't used it. We added some new ones, the senior center, they are anticipating needing some new cooking equipment, some of that isn't cheap. Extension, they're talking about a no-till drill or something that eventually they'll have one of their own to do and not the one that was donated. So there's lots of things, projects, equipment that those funds are used for.
And they can just be used, there's a monetary base, and they can only be used for certain things. They can't be used for, say, like personnel,
No.
right?
No. Have to be used for equipment,
Capital.
capital
right?
equipment.
And there's a threshold, is it 5,000?
Yes. We also have another levy they call the permissive health levy that is a little different than our regular general health that is floated some mills from. And that is also something that was mandated, a long time ago. They've been working on this 10 years to determine it. So there's an extra amount they realized over time that not everybody would be able to afford health insurance, just by the group health. And so this permissive levy was established back in 2000 for employers to charge, and it does include special valuations and how much we can charge from the permissive fund.
Was that a legislative or Department of Revenue?
I believe there was some legislation involved. I remember reading it right. There was a Senate bill, I believe, that made those changes. I saw it, I don't know where I saw it. There was a legislation involved. So
Is
there's
this
a-
it on the bottom, 74 there, 29101?
No, that's the one that dictates the employee group benefits. It's 29101 MCA. That tells certain levies are exempt from property tax limitation, like school districts, judgment levies, the protested taxes, emergency levy, and then the employee group benefits. Those are exempt from the property tax limitations, so, it was legislation, if I remember the history right, that made that change. I just don't remember offhand what year.
And is that a formula like with the road and floating mills that Department of Revenue does to figure out?
Similar, it's something that they've done. We had to establish a base contribution back in 2000. And there's a formula that this worksheet is filled out that we just plug the certified value for the fiscal year and everything automatically calculates. And the permissive levy is, Senate Bill 491, there it is. That expired last year, so now everybody is subject to the same criteria. There's no more option A or option B. It's the same criteria for everybody. And you have to plug in valuation, the mill's allowed to levy, and that's something that Department of Revenue does. They provide a special assessment for permissive. We plug that into that worksheet, and that's a separate from our general group health benefits. Anything else? Any questions?
No, thank you.
It's easier for me to answer.
Sure, that was a good overview.
There's just a lot there, and Harold's slide was very good. You can understand it, it does make sense. Go look up the codes, it follows right along with the codes. Pretty spelled out, makes my job easier. Tells me what to do. And it's just a matter of plugging numbers every year to make things work.
So that's kind of a basic overview. Does anyone have any questions at this point? Yes, sir.
Larry Rickmer, I just wondered, on those CIP funds, now they're for each department. Now, can they only be used back in that department again?
Mm-hmm.
And those funds, where do they reside when they're right now? I mean, are they in a, some money market, or where do those funds reside? And is there any, you know, how much are in those funds right now?
It varies. Some of them have nothing because they don't need anything and have nothing they need to save for. Others have quite a bit. The ambulance has been using it quite a bit the last few years, anticipating the need for a new ambulance. It is set aside, Doug has to set it aside at the bank, and every month or every quarter, he gets a report, and any interest earned has to go into those accounts. So they do earn interest, and Doug has them sitting somewhere. I'm not quite sure how he does that side of things. He gets reports and keeps track of that. Some funds have nothing, because like I said, they don't use them, or they're just starting, and there's maybe only $50 in there because they're just starting. So it just depends.
So those funds are basically money that wasn't used in that fiscal year that just gets carried over. Is there any way that they can be put back into the budget to reduce next year's budget, or are they just a reserve?
It's just like a reserve. It will come out of those if they want to spend it. So like this year, if the sheriff needs to buy a new vehicle, it would come out of those capital improvement, capital account. Otherwise, it sits there maybe for a couple of years until they need new vehicles, and then hopefully there's enough to pay them in full, depending on how many they need.
So you can't put it back into the regular budget to make up?
It's gotta go back into the
Yes.
same department. But what I'm thinking, if there's a lot of money in CIP all the time, maybe we're assessing too much upfront on our budgets. That's why I'd like to know how much money gets carried over every year. And then the other good part about that is, that I like about it, is the fact that, you know, you don't have departments just going out at the end of the fiscal year and spending all their money just so that they don't lose it.
Most of
And
the time,
basically, the taxpayers have lost it anyway, because they, you know, it's already gone in that fiscal year.
most of the time, they have to have it included in their budget this year as an expenditure. They know they're gonna have this expenditure in the future, so they're being frugal this year, and they're spending it, and it's going into their capital improvement account from their regular budget. So that they know it's coming, so it's not really going to waste, it's coming in, but it's being saved for a rainy day, so that they don't have to borrow.
Mhm.
Can I give us an example that might help make it more clear? The ambulance fund, they get a certain number of mills, and it's like 0.62 off the top of my head, that's close, it may not be accurate, but give you some idea. So they get that number of mills. If during the year they don't spend all of that, instead of the use it or lose it that we used to follow, now that excess money over the 33% reserve goes into the CIP that they have, and they've had it for years. Right now, they have 101,000 in their CIP. This is from a report back in March. A new ambulance is about $170,000. So what they're doing is they put together a plan that they're gonna save as much as they can every year of unused money, so that when it comes time to replace one of the ambulances, they have the money already in the CIP, and they don't come to the commissioners and say, okay, now we need $170,000 off the bat. That's what it's for, is to give department heads an ability to plan ahead for big expenditures. And so, you know, the taxpayers haven't lost it, it's in a savings account waiting to be used for the taxpayers' benefit. Hopefully it will save people's lives. You're welcome.
Keeps the draw from PILT down as well.
There's a need for a levy or an emergency levy,
Right?
or get a voter levy. We've come across this need, we need to vote.
Yeah.
And adding to the already floating mills that we tax.
Yeah.
Which is based on need, which is good too.
And good planning can keep taxes down because you don't have surprises. You can plan ahead and that's less expensive. Any other questions? Questions? I have some news to share that's budget related from the district meetings we had this week. Good news is PILT has been funded in full. Last year we got about $570,000 in PILT, and we use that also for capital expenditures or unforeseen situations. Something always comes in that's unforeseen. So we don't use PILT to balance the budget. And the reason for that is, if someday we lose PILT, we don't have a hole in our budget that we didn't plan for, just capital expenditures and unforeseen. But the bad news is Secure Rural Schools will not be authorized past this year. Secure Rural Schools actually gives quite a bit of money to the road department and substantially more money to the school. Where this is bad news, the biggest part of the bad news is Secure Rural Schools came in to offset property taxes for the money going to rural schools. The schools will get that money, period. If the feds don't fund SRS, that money that is not being funded by that federal grant or program will be funded by property taxes. Property taxes went up 2 years ago because SRS wasn't funded. It ended up being funded a couple months later, but this year it's not going to be funded, and we don't expect that to change. So property taxes will be increased, not by the county, but by the feds to make up that money going to the schools. It's out of our hands, it's out of your hands, it's all coming from Congress. I will say that Montana is very lucky in that our congressional delegation, this has nothing to do with politics. All three of our congressmen and 2 senators worked very hard and worked together, worked across political lines to solidify PILT and to hopefully save SRS, which it looks like they have not been able to do. So good news and bad news there. Larry?
Isn't that amount about $250,000 a year that the SRS has, so that's what the taxpayers would be looking at?
Not all of it. Dana will, I shouldn't even say Dana, it's the road department will lose their portion and it will not be made up by property taxes. But the bulk of that does go to the school, and yes, you're right, that will be made up by property taxes. So, very bad news. But again, your congressional delegation worked hard for us. They just couldn't get it past some of the eastern states. So, yes, Cheryl.
Cheryl Campbell, so we're not going to get any PILT this year, or?
PILT got fully funded again this year, thanks to the hard work of our congressional delegation,
and
about
that amount is?
$570,000. SRS, which is Secure Rural Schools, was not, and that's what we're losing this year. The two are almost like sisters, but they're not the same person, if that makes sense. They're similar but different. So, anything else? Any questions? All right, so at this point, Debbie, what we're at is we got your memo. Department heads got your memo. They've also gotten their expenditure and their revenue budgets. They'll be plugging in their numbers. Anyone who wants an increase will come and see us to justify that, show that they have the funding or the plan or proposal. And we'll adopt the preliminary budget in June. But we do not give valuations until August, so we don't have a budget until September, October, and that is by statute. So, I think that's it. Unless there's no more questions or any holes to fill by Debbie.
There are, I don't know.
All right. Oh, the other thing I need to share also from district, and I'm glad you're here, Corey. Harold Blatty is putting together his retirement package. So this summer, Mako is going to be busy working with the executive committee to put together what that looks like. Harold will not be doing any summer budget trainings. However, he worked with Sheila Hogan, who is the head of the Department of Administration, and they have put together county budget training. So if anyone wants further county budget training, contact Department of Admin, and they have webinars, they have tutorials, they have all kinds of tools for us for a variety of things. So they really stepped up, and that's the last I have.
Extra of the memos I sent out in case somebody didn't get one.
If anyone wants a memo, they're up here. If anybody would like a building the county budget, just ask, we'll go ahead and mail it to you, or email it to you. It's 9781 pages. So give us your email, we'll shoot this off to you, and you're more than welcome to it. It's a great document. It really does take things down to a level that is easy to understand. All right, thank you, Debbie. Good job.
Thank you.
And as always, if you have any questions that come up after you leave today, don't hesitate to ask.
Doors open.
All right. All right. Good job.
Oh, yeah.
Thank you.
I did not.
Anything else on the agenda for me today? What's that?
Okay. What's that?
I thought I sent all the addresses, so I'll go look and resend them.
Okay, I haven't checked commission, so maybe it's
I
there.
might have.
Okay, if you could send it to me personally, that'd be good. All right, we are 20 minutes early. Do you guys want to take a 20-minute recess, or do you want to jump into mail? All right, we're going to go ahead and jump into mail, and then we'll do public comment and stuff at 10 o'clock. First things first is the minutes. These are from May 9. They were sent out on Tuesday, if I'm not mistaken.
I make a motion to approve May 9th commissioner meeting minutes.
It's been moved and seconded to adopt the minutes of May 9. All those in favor, please signify by saying aye.
Aye.
Aye, motion carries. Thanks, Ann. Before we move on, I'm just gonna share this with the board. This is a graph that we received last year. It's a little bit past dated, but you can see the orange is us and where we're at. Orange is inflation, blue is where we're at. And this has been in our audit every year since I've been here. We're not keeping up with inflation. So just something to share. The other thing to share is, I'll just pass these down if you guys want, I do need them back.
Sure.
You can get copies if you want. Of the growth that we experienced from the last census to 2010, 68% of that was in people over the age of 60. We are an aging community. This one was used at the legislature actually and disseminated by MACO, and it shows the amount of money that we spent in inmate medical costs. $4 million there on the bottom. This will be offset by Medicaid expansion. So county governments and citizens who pay taxes are the recipients of about $4 million in savings because of Medicaid expansion. Not something that's been reported and something that should have been. From the bottom, moving up, we are the 9th best county in the state for taxes. We have of the 56 counties, we are number 9 for the lowest property taxes in the state of Montana. And that's in relation to the different pieces that go into that. It's just not a single dollar, but for what you get, for bang for the buck. And that's from Esri. And this is a list of the local government services, if anyone wants a copy, from Department of Admin. And more on that. So good stuff from the district meeting this time around. Thank you very much. May is Mental Health Month, and I have a handout from the Mental Health Advisory Council. Excellent handout, it's about 4 pages long. That'll be given out at Bob's, at the drugstore, to all citizens, and the Mint will have a pile, and their public is welcome to take copies of that. We'll also have some in the commission office too. We have a letter from Montana Department of Health and Human Services, and this is public health officials issue a rabies reminder. Every year we seem to have somebody who gets rabies, so that will also be presented to the Board of Health. Also from our district meeting, we have a report on our STIP. This is a different STIP than Doug does. This is a STIP with Montana Department of Transportation, and it just shows where we're at in the next round of big state highway projects. And if you start at the bottom and move up, you'll get to us faster than you will from the top moving down.
Awesome.
Yeah. This is a letter from the United States Department of Agriculture, and this is a list of the partnerships and activities taking place on the Montana National Forests. Last legislative session, Senate bill, and I don't remember, 511, was passed, and what it did is it hired a liaison between the federal Forest Service and local government. He was at our meeting. And basically what has happened is a number of collaboratives have started. There's been more logging on the forest. because of this partnership. And this is just an update of some of those things that are going on. This is American City and County. We also have a letter from Thomas Tidwell from the Forest Service. This is the chief letter of intent. And basically what he's talking about here is the need for Forest Service to not only address fire, but also to address planning prior to the fire to keep fire from being as devastating as it's been. Excellent letter. That'll also be in the commission office if anybody wants to read it. Thank you. You know what, Ann? I should give you all these even though, because they were part of the mail. Sorry for that. Here we have a letter from David Ewer, who is the executive director of the Montana Board of Investments. And I'm sorry Doug isn't still here, but he's wondering where his resolution is for our STIP program. We are mandated by BOI to get a resolution that states what our STIP process is. Doug and I worked on some language from our meeting on the 9th, and you guys have been emailed that, or need any edits back by Wednesday to get that to the public Thursday, and the ad will be put in for the public hearing today. It'll take a couple of weeks to go through that process. And the last bit is some good and bad news. This is regarding the Winston school zone, and this happened before you came on board, Nick. But we were able about a year ago to reduce the speed limit through Winston from 70 to 55. The citizens had come to us, we worked with MDT, they did a speed study, and they came back and they said, because everybody's speeding through Winston at 70 plus miles per hour, it's unsafe to reduce the speed, so therefore we're going to suggest that we just keep, therefore we're going to keep the speed at 70 miles per hour. Well, the citizens of Winston and this commission were not happy with that answer. So we worked through the process and went through the commission, the Transportation Commission under the Department of Transportation. And a gentleman there showed us a law that was relatively new by a senator out of Great Falls that allowed local governments to reduce speeds on state highways if there was an excuse of a school zone. And one of the things that could determine a school zone is a crosswalk. Well, we have a crosswalk across the highway. We use that new law. We have school zone signs now and a 24/7, 365 speed limit of 55 through Winston. It's been hard for law enforcement to enforce because it says school zone. Well, for most people, they don't think school happens in the summer. You can argue that because children are always learning, right? So that doesn't really go with law enforcement and needing teeth to enforce, but traffic has been slowing down. So we asked MDT if they do another traffic study to show that traffic is slowing down and therefore get just a regular speed reduction through Winston. Their response is, we have reviewed your request to remove the school zone signs on Highway 12 through Winston. Based on Montana Code annotated 61.8310.4B, quote, if a local authority decreases a speed limit in a school zone, the local authority shall erect signs conforming with the manual adopted by the Department of Transportation under 61.8202, giving notice that the school zone has been entered of the altered speed limit and the penalty provided in 61.8726, and that of the school zone has ended. We believe removal of the signing would require adjustment of the speed limit back to the previously statutorily approved 70 miles per hour. So based on that, I would like to maintain our 55 mile per hour school zone through Winston. There's so much traffic too. If one car slows down to 55, so do the 30 behind him.
Right. So it's either we stick with the school zone or they're gonna bump it back up to 70.
Yeah, yeah.
So yeah, I'd recommend staying with what we have in place right now.
Okay, I'll share this with Corey and Wynn too. The inline grinder is set to start today. There was Three Brothers was going to bring a proposal forward for the project. Mike did wait for them on Wednesday and they did not show. So he had no proposals for the project or bids for the project that were brought to him. So I think it was good though to ask for that, because it, you know, at least gives us some comparisons. This is the wrong folder. This is the right folder. This one is just an FYI more than anything. Last fall, we authorized Julie to contract for some of her licensing requirements to a company from Yellowstone called Yellowstone Environmental Solutions. Or excuse me, they're from Belgrade. They came to Broadwater County, we paid them $5,000 and they did inspections of some of our establishments. The latest bill puts her over the authorized $5,000 by like $20 to $30. So before signing that claim, I think we need to have commission approval. There's the total there.
We're at 5,100.
Yeah, so it's about 100 over.
How much more is there to do?
We're at the end of the fiscal year, so my guess, this is the end of it. I think we should let Julie know though that she's reached her $5,000.
Okay.
And I expect that she'll probably be coming to us this year with a request for the same.
Okay.
Even though she did $114.
I would second that.
It's been moved and seconded to authorize the payment of $114.70 over the allotted $5,000 to Yellowstone Environmental Solutions by the Sanitation Department. All those in favor, please signify by saying aye.
Aye.
Aye, motion carries. All right, and claims. We have the approved claims from last week in the amount of $45,932.56.
I make a motion to pay the approved claims from last week in the amount of $45,932.56.
I'll second.
It's been moved and seconded to pay the approved claims in the amount of $45,932.56. All those in favor, please signify by saying aye.
Aye.
Aye, motion carries. Let you guys give John Hancock's. Nick suggested a couple weeks ago that we start something new to increase transparency and share with you guys verbally who the places are that we're paying these claims and by how much. If you have any questions on the details of those, we have those also on our report, and we can answer those if you do have any questions. So we have Office Solutions in the amount of $319, A to Z Staffing Solutions in the amount of $1,494.40, 7 Availability LLC for $79, Balco Uniform Company $185, an employee for reimbursement $37.80. This was for training. Broadwater Health Center $15,000, and that was actually not to Broadwater Health Center. We were a pass-through for a CDBG grant. So that money came in, just like Debbie was discussing. We held it for a few minutes on their behalf and sent it back. So, let's see. Citizen for $1,300. I need my glasses. Broadwater Rodeo Association, $300. Capital Communications, $8410.90 and $240 and $536.25. CenturyLink, $32.27. Capital Communications, $49.14. Clearfly Communications for $1,721.87. Election Systems and Software, $3281.44. Elkhorn Medical for $137.87. $489.63. Family Medical Clinic, $115. Reimbursement to an employee for training, $500.13. Gallatin Recreation, Inc., $713.67. An employee reimbursement for mileage, $1809. An employee reimbursement for a conference, $52. Helena Ink and Toner, $252. Hemacure America, $188. Huffnagel Painting, $550. Reimbursement to an contractor, $338. Airport Conference, $200. KLN Construction, $950. Lairkines, $30. $32. Reimbursement for a medical visit, $90. MIC Sioux Creations, $800. That's for CRP training. Missoula City County Health Department, $660. $50. MSU Extension, $33. Part Source, $49.70. Reimbursement for medical, $31. Stanford Police and Emergency, $417. Steel, etc., $432. Reimbursement for the horses, $1,800. Townsend Muffler and Welding, $85. Townsend K-12 School District, $30. Tyler Technologies, $165.38. Ultramax, $1161. Wex Bank, $2,721.91. And reimbursement for coroner training, $52. Any questions? All right. So we're at 10 o'clock. Thanks for coming early. And it's time for public comment. Is there any public comment? Val?
I just wanted to let you folks know that I will be advertising for a part-time clerk, because Kelsey is going across the hall to the JP's office. It'll go into the paper this week and next week. Closes on next Friday on the 27th. So if you have any questions, you can let me know. I have had that, I did get the ad to HR for approval, and they'll be putting it in the paper. And also, I used the car, the Ford Focus, to go to Red Lodge last week. There is a really bad crack in the window. I did tell HR. It's been there, it was there before I got it, but it does need replaced. It gets in the eye line, so
Yeah.
that's just it.
You're just too tall, Val.
I know. But anyway, and one more comment. I'll take up the whole comment session, and then nobody else gets a chance.
All right, very
But
good.
I was at convention last week, and I just want to thank you as commissioners for everything you do. There was several counties, clerks that do not have the, as great a commissioners. They do not get along with their commissioners as well as I do, so I do appreciate you, and thank you. That's all I have to say, so I'll go back to work now.
That goes two ways. We're thankful for the relationship
Oh,
too.
thank you.
Thanks. All right, any other public comment?
Dwayne Holm. I'd like to know why Billy Amps was taken off of the deal roster because of, he wanted to know some questions for the 16th. There was 3 commissioners said yes, they would do it. Why?
I'm gonna let Billy answer that question for you, Dwayne.
I have the same question.
We gave you that letter last week. You and we spoke, and we said, are these questions good? And you said, no, I have more. So we gave you a letter, the commission did, we all signed it, we voted on it, and it said, as soon as you give us a list of all the questions you want us to answer, we'll put you on the agenda. We got that on, I don't know, Thursday, Tuesday, Wednesday, Thursday, last week. So we will put you on the agenda for next Monday, but our ad for the agenda goes out on Monday. We got your questions after that date, so you'll be on next Monday. That's what we agreed to in our verbal discussion and in the letter we sent you, or actually handed to you in person.
I didn't think you were gonna change it. I said I'd get you the questions beforehand, so you have them. I wasn't gonna blindside you, so I figured I was still on the agenda. I didn't think you were gonna take me off, because I had already been on it for quite a while.
You hadn't been on it because we didn't have we don't do the agenda until 1 week before. That was part of our discussion.
You did the agenda, but you said you were gonna put me on the agenda. You never did say you were gonna take me off. So
Yeah,
that's-
we did last week. It was in the letter. As soon as we get those questions, we'll put you on the agenda.
Meeting,
What's that?
I don't know what else was said at the beginning of the meeting. I assumed I was gonna be on the agenda,
Okay, well,
so. Otherwise, I probably wouldn't have had you sign the letter. We would just went forward with everything and everything.
yeah, I don't have a copy of the letter, but I will get it, we'll read it next week so that everybody's on the same page. But that was our
I got a
discussion,
copy
Billy.
here, so
And, you know, misunderstandings, I suppose, happen. So I guess from our part, we apologize, but you will be on it for next week per the letter and the conversation we had last week. Is that all right?
From what I recall, you were to be on the agenda.
You were to be, he was to be on the agenda. As of 2 weeks ago, you said, yes, we put you on the agenda. And all 3 of you said yes. Now, that's the
Okay.
real reason I came up here this morning, was for this agenda.
Okay, thank you, Dwayne. This was agreed to with Billy. There was a misunderstanding perhaps, but it was a verbal agreement, and it was in the form of a letter. So all we can do is move forward and put him on next week. So he will be on next week. Any other public comment? Melinda?
I have a question. So
if I need to be on the agenda, does that mean any questions I have to give them to you first to be pre-approved? And if that's the case, isn't that you're dictating to me what I can say to you about questions? Or what is that? Because if he has to give his questions first to you, excuse me, I'm kind of confused.
Okay, thank you. Any other public comment?
You shouldn't
All right.
have to.
What we're gonna do,
Just
I'm
ask to
gonna
be on
go
the
ahead and
agenda.
get a copy of that letter, so we're gonna recess for 2 minutes. I think